Now we're streaming. Okay, just gotta wait for the chat to pop up on my end. I wonder if there's like a way for me to just always be able to just see what my stream chat would be, regardless of loading it. We're streaming right now, Mike. If you
Yeah.
if you
What's up,
want to know.
guys?
Yeah, I don't.
What do you mean stream chat?
Yeah, so what I do is like I go to my website or my YouTube
The
channel,
page.
and then I wait for it to load.
Oh, you're saying like just have a tab that just whenever it's there, it's
Yeah, so
there.
that way I don't have to always go to my own site.
That does exist. I don't know exactly how to get to it, but it's your live
Okay.
dashboard. That's what it's called.
Okay. I think I
You
do
might
know
be
where
able to look
that's
for
at.
it.
I think I do know where that's at. All
There's
right.
like a permanent chat.
I think you're right. I'll look into it in the next stream. Hello, everybody. Today, we're gonna do some ZBrushing. You know what? I'm gonna pop this chat out. All messages are visible. Well, and then let's do a pop chat out. So I can close this. Open that. What's up, Marcus? Okay. Welcome to live chat. Remember to guard your privacy and abide by our community guidelines. Oh, okay. So today I'm going to be doing some more ZBrushing. You'll notice too that I'm trying to minimize my interface. It's pretty much just the thing that I can sculpt an amount of points, but I might even be able to get rid of that. And so the goal is to inevitably make it so that I can like pretty much sculpt whatever I want. Because like I was saying in the last stream that I had yesterday, was that I generally don't use ZBrush for like finished works. I tend to use ZBrush as a tool to just do like something I can paint over or whatever. But I'm discovering that I should probably like get better at the tool and really try to use it in the way that I think most people who love this tool, which is like to actually make 3D assets and stuff. Because I'm doing more game dev these days, and I'm like trying to get better at that world. And one way to get better at it is to learn the tools of making actual assets. I believe this is the time to really maximize that ability. And so one thing that I usually do whenever I deal with like new tools is try to like maximize my usability when it comes to interface. And then just start to like practice that. Train myself just only using hotkeys and interface type stuff. And if I find that I have to go reach for a menu item, then I usually will adjust accordingly. You know, I'll say, okay, oh shoot, no, don't do that. So like right now I'm like going through the hiccups of it, right? I'm feeling a little bit of the pain, but let me try to think. What is the hotkey here? S is for that. Let's do Dynamesh. Okay, so this is a good example. So I want more of the Dynamesh. So I actually created, and I was thinking about how I can do this, but I'll probably do it after. But one of the things that I like discovered was that you can make these like pop-up windows, and I was like, this is pretty useful, especially for stuff like this, Dynameshing, and so and for other reasons. But like once I can start to master my interface, then it just increases my productivity and my speed in general. You know what I mean? And so I'm trying to like learn it just for those specific reasons. Okay, so I'm going to try to do some folds here. Let's see. I was going to also try to learn another thing. Like I remember you doing those fold studies and made me question all my life. My whole life.
You go straight up to sculpting folds. You're a monster.
Well, like you'll learn a lot, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course.
You're a monster.
Because I have like a way to paint them, but to actually sculpt them in 3 dimensions, It's a whole different thing. Okay, so the larger shape seems to be billows right at the corner, according to this reference that I'm using. And this like larger canvas, I really like it because I can then start to use pure ref in a more real way. But anyway, did Rethace, is that person saying wrong? Wrong? Or did it say wow? But if you guys ever want to ask questions, you guys can ask questions too, by the way. It's not
It's not against the rules.
Yeah, it's not against the rules. So let's try to see if painting in or like drawing in the folds is a way to do it. This might be a Dynamesh thing too, where I use the Dynamesh, the live Dynamesh. Let's see. Or not the live Dynamesh, this Sculptress Pro. It adds like more topology as you sculpt in. It's essentially what
Like,
voxel mode and 3D Coat is like.
Yeah, Blender is doing that too, where the decimation's based off of the brush, right?
Yeah. So this is just me trying to make a guess at this. And I think I can see how I can be better about this. But yeah, like I said, anyone have any questions, go for it. I'm going to be just sculpting this as a tool. I'm going to do a couple sculpts. I'm going to do this sculpt, which is already, I'm feeling pretty bad about it. And then I'm going to do like a little creature sculpt, which is something that I think I'll feel better about. Whoa, supposed to be whoa. Whoa, wrong. Yeah, so this is interesting. So maybe like folding sculpts, what I need to do, or forms, what I need to do is just like, or folds, is I need to like create like the larger folds. This reference I'm looking at is like real life. So it's like living up to that standard is going to be really challenging. Yeah, this is the kind of thing too that I think I'll do like what you were doing when you were studying this. Like try to come up with or like know the names of the different types of folds that exist. That helps a lot. I remember when you did that.
Do you want me to tell you?
No, not the moment.
Okay.
Right now,
Yeah, it did help.
Yeah, right now, I'm just trying to. It's like a little bit of both, like learning the tool and learning a little bit about how I could probably sculpt folds. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I gotcha.
It's not right now. Like this like when I was teaching you, right? Like it's one of those things where you got to make the attempt, right? And then
Yeah.
after you've
You
made
gotta
the
see where you're
attempt,
at.
yeah, and then you kind of get like, okay, a little bit more focused on what you think. And I think that is definitely something that I'm going to do. So I might ask you later, but not right now.
Sure thing.
Yeah, like I might ask
Yeah, it's
you
really great,
offline.
man. Like knowing, just from anyone that's just doesn't know the context we're talking about. I had studied some fabric when it comes to painting, and I wanted to learn like what are the actual folds that are happening and why they're happening. So I found some resources and got that knowledge, and I think it helps a lot. So AJ had mentioned that he's such a badass that he didn't even need it.
No,
And
I've
like, oh, wait a
always,
minute,
I've always sculpted folds, or no, sorry, not sculpted, but painted
painting.
folds, just following a few simple logical parameters. There's a couple of things that I do that with. Rendering materials is the same thing. Like there's a couple parameters that I keep in mind, but it's enough. With painting, you can
Yeah,
kind of get away with a lot of it because it's all kind of an illusion anyway. But having that understanding still wouldn't hurt. So I might try to get up
yeah.
on
And
that.
my comment wasn't to discredit your abilities. Not at all.
How dare you?
You're you're clearly amazing. So
Nah, not clearly. All right. So this is the type.
opaquely, translucently.
Whatever, dude. All right. So
I'm a little behind on the stream, of course, but I like these. Look, some good looking fulls.
yeah, but like it's like I said, I feel like a lot of this is based off my own intuition,
Mm.
and I'm using reference right now. You guys can't see it, but I'm definitely using some reference. But again, this is like a little bit of like trying to learn the tool and the potential hiccups of like how I would go about rendering, or sorry, I keep saying rendering, how I'd handle like the actual folds. So I'm gonna try another approach after this, because like my folds feel very thick, and my reference it's not that thick. So I want to try to see if I can come up with like a faster way to kind of get the more appropriate type of folds in here. And also, this is only one-sided. It might be good to understand folds on a three-dimensional level. Is Blender actually any good for sculpting? I haven't used it enough, but a lot of my opinion is incredibly biased, so I generally try not to give too much feedback on that, just because I feel that my biases aren't realistic. My biases meaning that I use tools like ZBrush and 3D Coat, you know, and so like when I mess with something that I'm not that familiar with, like immediately I'm like, I'll just use ZBrush or 3D Coat to do that thing. You know, why would I use what you call it, Blender for a thing that I, you know what I mean, for the thing that I don't need. And that's just kind of where it's at. But I will say, is it good though? Like objectively speaking, I would say yes. I've seen really good 3D sculptures coming from Blender. Like it is definitely possible. Okay. It is not like if you use that tool, you're handicapping yourself entirely. You might actually find that there's a lot more value in it. But because of things like legacy with me, it's harder for me to see those positives for the reasons that I just laid out. You know, or it's just not as easy to determine. Yeah. See, the first thing that comes to my mind, like, so this is a good observational point. So you know, I always talk about like you gotta like try something and then learn, right? Um, and so like, and then when you're doing something and you're trying to learn something, and you're like, okay, how do I? So I feel pretty confident that I'm able to maneuver the clay, if you will, the way that I want to, right? I don't really feel that I'm too limited about how the shapes are being formed, if that makes sense, right? Like there's always like a catch sometimes. Like if you're messing with a tool and you're feeling like you're just like fighting the tool the whole time to make something good, then you gotta like take some time to learn the tool. And the best way to do that is to make something that you can just look at an image, you know, and then just try to sculpt from that image, right? So that way you're focusing all your attention on the actual tool, not on the subject of what you're sculpting. I like to do both for the very specific reason to see which is leading the show here. You know, is it that my tool is holding me back, or is it also like I just have lack of knowledge, or is it a combination of both? But I will say it's definitely feeling more that I have a lack of understanding, right? Less about the tool, if that makes sense. It feels real heavy on my lack of understanding. And so the very first thing that came to my mind, about like a solution to this problem is that, okay, what I'm doing here is I'm sculpting. I'm trying to sculpt these folds in, right? And I have a pretty good solution to putting folds in. Using the damn standard is actually not too bad. And then using some masks, right? But I'm looking at some of these folds that I see. I've seen that I'm starting to screw up this thing too. It's not looking like folds anymore. Because I was experimenting with different ways that I can probably sculpt folds. And it seems to me it's still pretty valuable to use the damn standard. But only because it's getting me the results that I'm expecting, right? And so but it made me think that I should start to learn how to sculpt like a sculptor. Okay, and the way that I was thinking about this is because when I was doing this, a lot of things were going through my mind, and this is usually a problem that I see in students. Usually, when students like make a mistake, right, or they don't understand like what to do next, they'll just kind of stop there, you know. But with me, and probably the big difference is that when I start to realize there's things that are not coming together the way that I like, or I'm just not, having a strong impact on what I'm anticipating, it must be because I don't have enough information, or I need to like think about where I can get that information, if that makes sense. And so in this case, oh yeah, damn standard for sure is OP. I think this is the way. I'm gonna do another object and try again. No, we don't need to say that. We'll do one more study, and this is tool refinement here now. And I was thinking to myself, and like going back to the point of my premise about like most students and most people who are just starting out, they tend to just stop here. And so my solution is generally the best solution you should try to aim for, usually, which is make the mistakes, fall apart, fail in front of yourself as often as you can. But then not on top of that, not only that, like on top of that, you should then analyze why that problem exists. And then don't just stop there. You should then try to create a solution to potentially solving the problem. And so, for instance, like I said, I should sculpt like a sculptor, right? What I meant by that is like, I remember going to a museum and seeing sculptures of cloth, and it looked like cloth. Do you know what I'm talking about, Mike? Are you still here?
Yeah.
Because maybe there's some answers there, right? Maybe there's like some traditional or classical way of sculpting that I can mimic or learn from, right? And apply it to my ZBrush sculpts. I did the same thing when it came to what's the thing that I do a lot? Painting. What the heck?
Painting. What the heck?
What the hell just happened to my brain? Is it because like I'm learning and I'm trying to sculpt at the same
and you're
time?
talking.
Yeah, if I was just painting like whatever, I can do it like no problem, because I usually am really proficient at painting, but not sculpting and learning. I can't talk and learn at the same time. Yeah, but when I was learning painting, so I'm just going to take a break from sculpting so I can just explain and get my thought out entirely. So when I was learning painting, I did the same thing. I looked at all the traditional painters and I saw what they were doing, and then that's when I learned how to paint, right? Because I was like followed in the steps of some of the greatest, like Sargent, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, one of my favorite, Johann Wiepert's Georges Wiepert's. I forget which one comes first. Jeremy Gaddis, Phil Hale, some of the living legends. Just traditional ways of sculpting, and painting. And that helped me a lot. And of course, I would use modern techniques, what was available to me amongst my contemporaries, right? Because why not, right? Why would I only stick to one thing unless I'm like a real purist, which some people are, right? It seems like the damn standard's like the way to go, dude, was getting these folds in. It's just now I just need to learn like the hierarchy of folds. But like the point I'm trying to make is that so there must be some evidence in traditional ways of doing things, because they didn't have all these amazing tools, right? So they had to come up with like strategies and techniques that were really useful to them when they were carving it out of stone, And if I can like simulate some of that, I might be able to like just hand sculpt really believable folds, which will then circumvent me from ever using something like Marvelous Designer and supplement the things I don't know, right? But does that mean should I never use Marvelous Designer? No, I probably will use it until I can just master this fold nonsense, right?
Well, with that approach, you'll learn why and when to use it.
Yeah,
Like when is it
it's
really powerful?
you're right. It's probably going to double down like my lessons of like how folds work, right? When I see it
Hmm.
dynamically changing in front of my eyes, right?
Yep.
That's a great point, and that's the point that I usually make to my students when it comes to like learning 3D, because they're like, "Oh, well, should I learn 3D?" You know, and I say, "Yeah," because when you learn 3D, you actually learn how things look in 3 dimensions in a more um, real way, you know. And so, like, yeah, I agree with this sentiment. Um,
Wrong.
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 Yeah, but do you have any thoughts about this stuff that I'm saying out of my mouth? The things that are
Me?
coming out of my mouth? Yeah, you man.
Yeah, I mostly agree with everything. There's nothing like. I think you're on the right track. I'm not really the person to
Whatever, dude.
give you advice on learning. It's like that's kind of backwards.
No,
But
you're getting good, man. You're starting to become a master learner, and so
I appreciate that.
there
So
might
I
be
also
something.
would think I think what's most important is learning when it comes to folds, like what are the most common ones, and kind of focusing on those first. I think that would help because for example, there's a fold. I sent you on the Discord text a screenshot of what the main six are. There's a
Oh,
seventh.
sweet, thanks.
Yeah, there's a seventh that I didn't put on there because it's so unique. It's pretty much when like you see like old paintings or like those sculptures like you were talking about, and it's all the drapery that's just kind of tossed on the ground and folding every which way. It's like a collection of all of those together. I can't remember the
I
name of
see.
it, but that one's less common than what the other six are, right?
Yeah,
So I'd say zigzag folds are very common. Um,
zigzag.
drop folds, drop folds and pipe folds are pretty much the same. It's like whenever you're painting and you do like your skirts or your long trench
Skirt.
coats.
I'm trying to I'm trying to be your hype,
Yeah, hey, man.
your ad lib person.
Yeah.
Skirt.
So there's those, and then there's the diaper folds, which I'd say is
Diaper.
actually one of the even more common ones. That's when there's 2 points of tension, and you can see it in like your shirts. Like if you look down at yourself, there'll probably be
Ew.
a diaper fold between your shoulders and your chest.
I don't look down on myself.
Especially
I'm super
if you
positive.
lean forward and let the clothing like sag,
I don't
so
let
that'll
things
happen.
sag.
Oh my God, I'm done.
Skirt.
That's enough.
No,
So
that's all
yeah,
good insight,
so
man.
there's some cool stuff. I want to sculpt some stuff too. I think that'd be great. Um, I was gonna use Blender though. I
Yeah,
want to
man.
fully commit to Blender. I seen on Twitter there's this guy. Can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's been working on Blender additions to the sculpt branch, like all on his own, and he's doing some pretty sick stuff. Um, and I've
Yeah,
seen some folks that are doing good stuff already, so it's only gonna get better. And
yeah,
I'm in the camp
yeah. I
of
agree.
as a student, I feel like limiting how many software I learn is going to help tremendously because it can become overwhelming pretty quick.
Yeah,
And I remember that from my positive procrastination is I was
yeah,
learning so many programs like and not using them,
yeah. I
you
agree
know?
with this sentiment.
So,
Yeah, because when I was learning 3D, there was only one sculpting program,
right.
and it was ZBrush. You know, but now there's so many choices, so I can see how that would be a problem now.
I have a
Uh,
question for you.
yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Um, at what point did you so it sounds like you were learning around the same time. At what point did you make the decision to go more towards 2D over 3D? Like what stopped you from becoming a 3D artist?
I always wanted to be a 2D artist. It was never.
Oh, I see.
I only learned 3D to do better 2D.
Gotcha.
But like only now am I trying to learn 3D to make 3D. You know, in a real way. Not like I don't think I'll be like the best of them. You know, I have some really good friends who are like the best 3D modelers and character modelers and environment modelers in the business. But I'm trying to be like reasonably good. You know, and
Yeah.
so I'm gonna take this time. All right, I think this is a good study. I might actually save this one so I can document it later. Oh yeah, I need a menu so I can save. There you go, document. Save as, save the document. Okay. Save to the desktop. Cloth study 1. Yeah, and then I'm gonna do a little bit of a little organic sculpting just to get back into swing of that. Hey Anthony, hey Mike, hi people in the back. Hey man, at this point, do you have any plans in your mind? Oh, okay, so I was just kind of telling you what's going on. I was just focused on learning. I wasn't focused on anything else. Is Blender actually any good? I already talked about that. I'm watching you from Brazil. I love your job. Oh, thank you. What are you sculpting? I already talked about that. Modern day James made awesome videos about fold types.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks,
I learned a
Casper.
lot from those.
Yeah, modern day James is great. I think he's kind of like what I love about his videos. They're very precise. Like they're very like this is exactly how you should do this thing, you know, and I like it. It's like very calculated for art, you know. But most of the videos out there, there's a lot of technical advice on like how to use tools, which is the most prevalent because it's easy. Like how do I use this ZBrush? Right? Like tool. How do I make this? You want videos like that for your software because you want to be able to navigate your software. But with painting, there's very rarely is any kind of like straight instructional, like this is how you draw better boxes. This is how you draw better like organic shapes, whatever, right? The only other source that does this that I could think of is Scott Robertson's book, you know? And I feel like he's filling that void. That void is definitely needed, you know? And there's a lot of videos out there of people just showing you how they do it, but they don't necessarily explain anything, right? So like I think the gap that I filled was trying to understand the reason why you want to learn how to draw your shapes those ways, right? But I wasn't necessarily doing what modern day James is doing, which is more technical. Like this is exactly how you get better at drawing in perspective. This is exactly how you get better at drawing these types of lines, you know? And I think those are probably heavily influenced by that Scott Robertson books, both of those books probably. But he's just making it so you don't have to read, you know? But I've always told people you should actually go to Scott Robertson's books for that reason, you know, because Scott Robertson's all about that, you know? And so, like Scott Robertson, John Park, these folks are like technicians when it comes to becoming good artists, right? And I highly recommend them every time people ask. So yeah, Modern Day James, man, I like it. I like his stuff a lot. I think he's doing some good works. So if you guys don't know who he is or what he's about, you go follow his YouTube channel. It's great. Yeah, maybe I should reach out to him and we can do like a dual podcast thing like we did with Adam.
Yeah, that'd be dope.
That would be dope. I shall find him and reach out. Yeah, he's affiliated with Brainstorm, so maybe I can go through that and get a hold of him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. How's your classes been?
That's good. We just finished. It's been great.
Nice.
Great. Hello,
Saw on
Anthony.
their Instagram some stuff.
Yeah. Hello, Anthony. Love your work. Laugh out loud. Maybe he was laughing at a joke we talked about. Dude, this effing high school is taking most of my day, which can be used for improving my art. I hate it. Well, I will say that, like, okay, I'm going to take this time to start sculpting something, and I can start talking again. I'm going to sculpt something that I'm used to sculpting, which is some sort of creature head. Won't require too much thought. I will say that, you know, a lot of times whenever people are complaining about time, especially, you know, you're saying that you're in high school and you hate that a lot of that time is being robbed from you. My advice usually in that context is that you shouldn't be too upset about it. You should just do what you can with the time that you have. I actually was talking to a high school student the other day about this very thing, and my advice to them was very similar. It was like, you know, you should draw in class when you can. If your teacher doesn't want you to, then, you know, you should have a conversation with them outside of class. You should explain to them what I'm about to tell you pretty soon. But the point I'm trying to make is that, you know, you don't want to come at it like every other like teenager, you know, going to high school, like this rebellious teenager that wants to go against the teacher's will. You know, if you can come at them reasonable, they might surprise you and be reasonable right back, you know? if you're just coming at them like some sort of teenage angst and you're just like trying to like stick it to the man type of thing, then yeah, you're gonna get some pushback, right? Because they're just gonna look at you that way. And so the advice I usually give people is that think of it like go up to them and say, look, I'll do my best in class. I'll always submit the homework as best I can, but you have to understand that if I'm drawing in class, I am paying attention. I am doing the work. I'm focusing, but I'm drawing because I need to improve. I'm trying to take as much time and ability so that I can get good at this. So by the time I graduate or by the time I get out of high school, I can have a good head start and start pursuing my career as an artist. And the career that I want to have, and you can bring them, like maybe if you have iPad or iPhone, like collect a lot of your favorite artists and all the people that you admire, show them this art, right? Show them the correlation. Say like, this is the art that was done for Infinity War. Here's all the costume designs, or here's all the art that was done for this music cover, or this is the art that was done for this animated show, or this is the art that was done for this stuff. Like just show them like clearly art is a job, right? And then you can give them these numbers, like a entry level salary for a concept artist in the gaming industry. At least the last time I checked, is somewhere between $70,000 to $80,000 a year. Okay, that's more than what most people would actually get after they graduate college at like a regular type job, or the standard job, I would say, not regular, the Gennaro jobs, right? And that's entry level. People who are at a higher tier, you could tell them, well, if I really pursue this and really do well, by the time I'm in my, in a senior level as a concept artist, I could be easily making upwards of $100,000 to $150,000 a year, right? And this is a career. This is a career that not only would I be happy to do, right, because it will be pursuing my dream, right? It's lucrative. There's value in it. But as I've just shown you, and like I said, in the context of you showing them your like the competition in which you have to compete against, I need to like live up to these standards, and I'm gonna squeeze every ounce I can get. I'm not gonna dick around in your class. I'm just when I'm drawing, I'm working on like my perspective. So I need to have a better understanding of perspective. It allows me to draw things in 3 dimensions. I'm gonna have a better understanding of anatomy. So I'm gonna be drawing people. Like arms and legs, whatever. It's homework to become a good artist. And if you come at them like that, you know what I mean? And they're still like, no, then you need to talk to your parents and have a conversation with them, especially if they support you, and you tell them the same spiel. And then if they're good parents, especially if they're really supportive, they'll be the ones that go in and be like, the F did you tell my son, or my daughter, And so, yeah, you gotta respect. I always say, you gotta respect the authority, so that way you make sure the ball's in their court. And then if they give you kind of some sort of pushback, then you have more evidence that they are trying to like hold you down. But you might actually be surprised that they would actually be like, oh my god, that was super, like really insightful and really well thought through, and that you actually aren't like joking around, you might actually be shocked that some of these people will support, like these instructors will actually support this goal of yours. But if you haven't given them a chance, if you haven't had that conversation and like really thought it through at like a little bit of a PowerPoint, like I was kind of demonstrating, you can't entirely like. Again, I'm making assumptions here, so you might have already done this and you already gone through these notions, but you can't necessarily say it's the school's fault. And I will say that like I'm saying this to help the situation ultimately, right? And like I was saying earlier in my stream, I do many of the things that I do, or I improve the way that I improve because I also will see the problem and try to come up with a solution that I feel is reasonable and fair, And if you can do the same thing, you'll be surprised at how much more progress you'll make in both your art, your relationships with people in the art community, and you'll have a grander understanding of like the industry as a whole versus just just making assumptions and just going full whole, like getting whole on your opinions. And I will say that like I'm not immune to this either. I have to check myself quite a bit. But it's really important that you understand, like, if you have like a reasonable approach to things, usually you'll be rewarded more so than punished. So hopefully that gives you some helpful advice. And this is specifically to those who are in the high school demographic, my teens. Yeah, I don't know what the person said. I'm gonna go read the comments. Maybe that's helpful. Are you looking at reference while sculpting these? When I was doing the fabrics, I was, for sure. Not this right now. You are good at not changing your design over and over again. Any tips? Okay, so I can answer that fully. Hey Anthony, would you use the 80-20 rule in organic sculpting? Yes, absolutely. The fabrics, yes. Hello, you guys. Or hello there, guys. Hello? Hello, hello. Okay, so going back to...
I'm back.
What the?
Sorry.
Oh my god.
I had to handle some things.
Going back to the question of like, I don't change my designs often. That goes back to the reason why I was studying the folds, right? So the reason why many people like go over and over on their designs or their artwork is because they don't really have the answers, but they guessed the answers and they just put them in, if that makes sense. And so if you guess a lot of the time, then you're going to make a lot of mistakes. But if you don't guess and you're putting things down with some intent, you'll make less and less mistakes. And I understand that that's really hard to do, but that's kind of the point of why you should do it, you know? Because, you know, it's really hard to learn new information or to gather new insight and then run with it. But it is the difference maker in a lot of situations. Yeah, so for me, the reason why I tend to make less changes on a broad spectrum is because I am mostly in control of what I'm doing. Mostly. So I was studying those folds because I wanted to like, because painting folds is obviously so much easier to kind of fake and get away with in 2D. It's not so easy to get away with in 3D. And I do a lot of characters and designs in 2D. And so doing that in 3D, if I want to have like very similar open range about like the kinds of things I can pull off, I actually need to learn how to like potentially just sculpt folds, you know? So that way I don't have to kind of jump in and out of different softwares to replicate it. At least for now, you know? I don't have any issue with using different softwares initially, but the ultimate goal is to not use them all the time, you know? All this time. Yeah. Yeah, see, this is the kind of things I'm more used to sculpting. Oh, dude, I should...
Give it some feathers. It's like one of your bird monsters.
Yeah. See, I could do some feathers. I know how to get away with doing that. But this is one of those things that makes me love 3D Coat more. Is it because I can just like it actively feels like I'm painting in the feathers, right? Versus like I have to think it through. Like I have to use like an append brush. I'm sorry, not a pen brush. I have to make like an append shape, and then I got to
Insert multi-mesh.
Insert. Well, no, you can do that, but I can do like an array.
Okay.
And then that will work really well. So that way I can just do one little feather and then just array it and mix it around. Which would be similar to 3D Coat. It's not too far off the same path, but it's like with 3D Coat you can like just grab the spear brush and just start drawing stuff, you know, and then from there I can just fix it. But like I said, I'm sure there's a way that I can even sculpt feathers. And one thing that I would say is that like the thing with 3D that I recognize is going to be the largest hurdle is that I have to actually be more methodical when it comes to like how things go together, you know? Where in 2D, it's like really easy to fix those types of problems. All right, so this is fine. I can probably just do, I'll do count of 1, and then just ZBrush this. I forget exactly what Jason showed about like how you can project the details back on. But luckily I wasn't doing a lot of details that I think were, like a lot of it was superficial. So I don't think I need to keep it, you know? It was mostly just to get the forms. And now what I want to do is just keep ZBrushing this so I get like a pretty low, let's not adapt. So I can get a pretty low topology thingy. Because I was just going for the larger shapes. Maybe this is too low. Yeah, and then I can do a subdivision from here. And then work the way that I used to. Like before they had Dynamesh, this is how I used to work. And then I got too spoiled with Dynamesh that I forgot about this workflow. And then I saw like my buddy Jason's video, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. You like when you have like low poly and you can go to the subdivisions, that's actually better because you can do the macro, the T-Sherry, and all that stuff, and it's all controlled, and it's really good. It's actually super convenient.
His video is the first time I ever saw it like in use, to where it made sense to me.
Yeah, so like,
oh,
yeah, so like you see right here, like I can like it's kind of like I'm painting out of focus, and then I can add more focus by subdividing it some more, and then as I add more focus, maybe I need to make more changes to like the bigger picture. Maybe I like went too far off, you know. And I can go back to a like a lower subdivision, and then make those changes, you know, in a really controlled way because there's less like density, right? And that lack of density is actually super, super convenient, you know? It's like you can like, it's like if you can go back in time with your thumbnail stage of your design, like in concept art, you know?
yeah.
And then like change the thumbnail, you know? And then go back to when you're like the render state of your painting, and it will just change like the proportions accordingly, you know? Which obviously can happen. You know, you got to make major changes. But like, just imagine that you could do that, right? And ZBrush, because it's 3D, it allows you to do such a thing, and it's freaking awesome. Yeah, see, so I'm like at this different stage, and so I can really focus in on these primary forms. It's really nice, and it's really easy to maintain. Yeah, was there any questions? Can you filter some questions?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we'll take like some questions from here on out. You might want to write it too, so that people can know, because it's faster. Okay. And then I'm gonna go. I have a meeting that I have to get to pretty soon. Luckily, it's a loose meeting. I don't have to. It's not like on a specific timer, but I need to get back to somebody and then move on with my day. Got to do some work too. Got some free nights to get done.
Yeah, and I got some homies coming over, so.
Nope. Cancel your
20 minutes.
Yeah, we could go even faster than that. We'll just do like the next 10 minutes.
Cool. All right, here's a question.
Yeah, go for it.
You probably answered this a million times, but what sort of media inspires you to make all these creatures and creepy guys?
Yeah, so this isn't a question I answer all the time actually, but it is a good one. So a lot of my creature designs and stuff are actually mostly inspired by the form. It's more of a technical thing that inspires me to make these. Like the way that I create designs and monsters and stuff is driven almost primarily by the fact that it's fun to paint forms of this quality, you know? And that's really the best answer. And then like obviously thematically I'm a big fan of like black and white photography, I've always been a fan of that stuff. And so then, like, I like painting in black and white. And so then the creature stuff, that again, that's more like forms. But then, the kinds of things I really enjoy painting, like some really kind of provocative imagery, that's mostly driven by like fashion design. I'm a really big fan of modern day fashion and aesthetic. And one of the things that I really love about fashion design is like modern fashion and how that looks. That's some really cool stuff there. Um, I know I had his head down there, but I'm gonna put his eyes down there. Nah, I'll keep to that. Keep to that aesthetic. But most of what I do is heavily driven by those factors. It's not so much like there's like a show that I watch, because the kinds of things that I'm really into, story wise and thematically, would not make sense with the kind of stuff that I actually make. You know, I like to consider myself a normie in the kinds of things that I engage in. I don't. There's not like these cult films that I love. I like all the popular stuff, the mainstream stuff. Like I'm really excited for Endgame. You know, even though ultimately I may not ever work for Marvel because of the content of my work, it's completely bizarre and different. You know, um, like the kind of film that I can see myself working on would be like a Hellboy movie, maybe, or the movies like this. You know, and I'm fans of those too. I'm a fan of all that stuff. I'm a fan of cool stuff in general. Um, but definitely, I'm more mainstream than you would think. I love that stuff. I really do. So I defend it like aggressively. A lot of my peers always talk crap, and I'm just like, nah. I love Fast and the Furious.
All right, here we go. Another one. Or let me give you this comment. It looks like it might have been after one of your answers. Um, Lazizo, Laszlo, Laszlo said, "I left high school because I hated graphic design and felt that the teachers and homework are just fucking me up. At this point, I'm not sure if I made a good decision though.
High school or college?
I don't know.
Yeah,
They said high school.
yeah. Because high school, um, I believe, is mandatory. I mean, you can like leave, but I don't think it's wise. Um,
Maybe they're in a different country than ours.
yeah, maybe you're right. But like university, because like even the statement of graphic design, right? That seems a little weird too. To say from a high school, like a high school that teaches you graphic design. What? Sounds like an awesome high school. you know, because again, like at least in the states, high school is essentially free if you go to public high school, right? So them giving you like some valuable knowledge about like graphic designing um, sounds like a deal to me. But if
Yeah.
you go to
Well, also
university,
the quality of your education is limited by the uh, county you're in
that's true.
as well. So,
Yeah, but I
oh,
guess
he said he corrected college. He meant
yeah,
college.
college makes way more sense. Um, yeah, I don't think so. I left college for very similar reasons. It was an art college too, and they were making me not do art a lot of times, and I didn't understand what the point of that was. It was like I get like in high school if you're drawing while the teacher's talking, they're gonna get upset about that, because it's not like normal to do something like this, and it feels and looks disrespectful. I get that, like I could sympathize with that, but I was going to an art school and they were doing that, and I was just like, what the, you know? That's a little bit more sketchy because at art school, because I was drawing in my compositing class, and my compositing teacher just did not like that and was like real strict. And I remember making a point to him like, look, I don't want to be compositor. I want to be a concept artist, and this is just the type of stuff that I need to do. And he did not like that response. And um, after that day, I decided to leave college because of that one incident.
Yeah. Okay. I got two more questions, and then I gotta go. All right.
Nope.
Uh, you can answer more on your own if you need.
No, I'll take those two, and then I
Okay.
gotta go too.
All right, so we got this next one. Is your daily work similar to what you are demonstrating on YouTube?
Uh, when I do my paintings and stuff, yes. Not sculpting. I don't do too many. Well, that's not true actually. Like some of the stuff I've been doing, actually, I've been doing more sculpting. But usually the stuff that I do for work is similar, but not necessarily in subject matter, but definitely in terms of like work, like doing paintings and concepts. It's pretty close. It's just the subject is different. But there is some work of mine that you would be surprised that I've done work like that before, because you don't see anything like that on my portfolio. But that's kind of the point of why I've made my portfolio the way that I made it. Is I made it so that I wouldn't have to take on these types of jobs. Not to say that I don't think that I am better than any kind of work. It's just I don't want to do certain types of work because I know it's not the best for me, if that makes sense. But
Yeah.
but yeah, you should definitely pander your portfolio to the kind of work that you want to do, not what other people are telling you to do.
Yeah, like I remember to count just a comment on that to counter that, without disagreeing, is one of my instructors in college had told us all to lower our expectations and all do like a bunch of prop design in our portfolio, even if we wanted to do characters or environments or anything else, because that was gonna get us a job sooner.
Yeah,
And that was like counter to what you were saying.
yeah, and he's not wrong. But the problem is that when you get that work, it's not like then you can level up to be a character person, especially if you
Yeah,
become really good at that work, right? Because then you end up
yeah,
staying at that position for years. And then every
yeah.
time you apply to be a character person, whatever, they're going to like say, well, you don't have anything that shows that you're a good character artist, but you're really good
It's
at
like
doing
which
that one
aligns to your
thing.
priorities.
Yeah. But you might demonstrate you're really good at graphic design, right? And it's because you keep doing graphic design. See, so you think about like when I started as a character designer and with doing like offshoot stuff for my first bosses. But I was originally hired to do some characters, and that ultimately led me to become better and better at character design because I just kept on doing it because I was doing it all the time, you know. So that's kind of the point I'm making with that statement.
Yeah.
But yeah, I usually encourage people to do what they want. So my YouTube is not necessarily a portfolio. It's more of just me hanging out, and y'all can hang out too. You know, I would be doing this very thing anyways, right? So it's more of like I'm inviting you guys to hang out with me whilst I do this thing that I was ultimately going to do, regardless.
Okay. Now the last question, it says, speaking of fashion, do you use Marvelous Designer?
No, I don't use it at all. I've tried to use it a couple times, and if it was cheaper, I'll probably own it, even though I wouldn't use it often. Um, but it's not that I don't like it; it's just that I don't use it. It's going back to kind of what you were saying earlier about like learning all these different tools. Uh, it would be like the
Yeah.
same sits in the same category of like why I don't use it. Not that I think that it's bad, but because um, I'm not going to really utilize it. You know?
Yeah, and that comes with a little bit of like honesty with yourself. I've
Yeah,
had to do that myself.
yeah. It's a really cool tool, though. I
Yeah, for
actually
sure.
think it's
I
really,
bought it. I
yeah,
bought it out of college, but I didn't use it much. So, good example of that.
yeah. I could see myself using it quite often, but again, I'm like, well, do I want to learn a tool, or do I actually just want to learn how to do clothes better? That was kind of the question. that I ask myself, right? Because what is
I see.
this ultimately solving? It's solving the problem that I can't do really good 3D folds, right? And clothing. And then my solution to this, at least for now, is just get better at sculpting folds in clothing, so to the point where it's super intuitive and easy to do, right? Which will take some time, absolutely. It's what I'm doing with the graphic novel stuff. Like I've been like in my sketchbook filling it up every day, you know, and ultimately it's going to lead me to be a better environment designer and artist. That's kind of the purpose of that sketchbook for now. All right, I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, folks. I'm gonna bounce out. I'm glad that you guys hung out. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys enjoyed this sculpt. I might continue painting on or sculpting on this. Who knows? Actually, I might. I want to do some tests with normal mapping. I might take this a little bit further. But with that, thank you guys for hanging out. I appreciate y'all. I hope you guys all have a good one. And then I'll talk to you guys when I talk to you guys. Latest, friends.
See ya.